You weren't supposed to be back until Thursday, my sister said, standing in the doorway of my own apartment with a dish towel over her shoulder like she owned the place. She did not step aside. She did not look embarrassed. She looked at me the way you look at a delivery driver who shows up at the wrong address. I stared at her, then past her. My entryway table, the one I had shipped from Portland, was pushed against the wall, replaced by a pile of mismatched sneakers and a stroller with a cracked wheel. The smell of fried onions and baby powder hit me before I could say a single word. Natalie. My voice came out flat, controlled, the way it gets when I am processing something too large to react to in real time. Why are you in my apartment? It was not a question. It was a read aloud of what my eyes were seeing, spoken slowly so that my brain could catch up. She pulled the dish towel off her shoulder and twisted it between her hands. Marcus and I had a situation. A situation. The landlord locked us out. It was completely illegal. He has no right to. Natalie. And we had nowhere to go. And Mom still has her knee thing, so we couldn't stay there. And I remembered you gave me the spare fob for emergencies. Natalie. I said her name again, harder this time. And she finally stopped talking. Where is Marcus? In the back bedroom. He's putting Eli down for a nap. She finally shifted, giving me just enough room to step inside my own home. And I did, moving past her slowly, taking inventory. My throw blankets were balled up on the floor. My kitchen island was covered in formula cans, fast food bags, and a half-assembled pack-and-play. My white curtains had a handprint on them. Small, sticky, low to the ground. A child's handprint, in something orange. I turned to face my sister. She was 31 years old, and she was standing in my living room with the expression of someone who had already decided that whatever I was about to say was an overreaction. I had seen that face my entire life. It was the face she made when she borrowed my car without asking and brought it back with a cracked side mirror. It was the face she made when she told our parents I had gotten a bonus before I had a chance to mention it myself. It was the face that had always worked on me before, because I loved her, and because loving her had always cost me something. How long? I said. Just until we get back on our feet. 2 weeks. Maybe 3. You changed my lock code. She blinked. The fob kept glitching. You changed my code. I pulled out my phone and opened the smart lock app. She had not just changed it. She had removed my owner profile and added herself as the primary user. I was a guest in my own home. A guest who had been deleted. The door to my second bedroom opened and Marcus appeared in the hallway, holding my godson Eli on his hip. Marcus was 34, broad-shouldered, currently unemployed, and wearing the comfortable expression of a man who had fully unpacked. He had helped himself to my guest slippers, the charcoal ones I had bought at that boutique in Nashville. Hey, Sofia. He said it like we were bumping into each other at a family barbecue. Didn't expect you back yet. I wrapped up early, I said. A silence fell over all three of us. Eli reached toward the ceiling fan and said something that sounded like a question. I looked at my sister. I need some air. I'll be back in 20 minutes. See? She said, her shoulders dropping with relief. I knew you'd understand. You always come through for us. I walked out the front door without answering her. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time. Not 20 minutes. Longer. I sat there in the dark, both hands on the steering wheel, watching the number on my phone screen as I dialed my building's property management office and got sent to voicemail. I hung up. I called back. Voicemail again. I called the emergency maintenance line, explained that my lock credentials had been overwritten without authorization, and was told someone would look into it within 48 hours. 48 hours. I set my phone face down on the passenger seat. I had bought this apartment at 29. I had saved for 4 years, lived on a budget so strict that I meal prepped on Sundays and did not go on a single vacation. And I had closed on this place in November with money that belonged entirely to me. 2 bedrooms, 12 floors up, floor-to-ceiling windows that faced the river. I had earned every square foot of it, and my sister had moved herself in while I was presenting at a UX conference in Chicago. Here is what I knew about Marcus and Natalie's housing situation, because I knew my family. Their landlord had not locked them out illegally. They had been evicted. I knew this because my mother had called me 6 weeks ago, in the middle of my workday, to ask if I could lend Natalie $4,000 to cover back rent. I had said I couldn't do it right now. My mother had sighed heavily and said, I just hope she doesn't lose the apartment. She had. And now she was in mine. I picked my phone back up. I was not going to call the police. Not yet. I had thought about it for the entire elevator ride down, and I had decided against it not because I was weak, and not because I was a pushover, but because I was strategic. Calling the police meant a scene. It meant my godson waking up screaming in an unfamiliar place. It meant my sister crying in a parking garage and sending 17 texts to every family member we had. It meant my mother calling me cold-hearted for the next calendar year. And it meant Marcus, who was the kind of man who always seemed to find a legal technicality to grab onto, potentially claiming some kind of occupancy rights before I had a chance to close the door on that possibility. No, I needed to do this the right way, the clean way. I opened my notes app and started writing. I was back at the apartment in under an hour. I had stopped at the 24-hour copy center 2 blocks away. I had also stopped at the coffee place on the corner and bought myself a large dark roast, because I was going to need it. Natalie was on my couch watching something on my television when I walked in. She had found my good blanket, the weighted one, and was wrapped in it with her feet tucked under her. She looked up when I came in, reading my face the way she always had, checking the temperature of my mood. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said, setting my bag on the kitchen counter. "I've been thinking. And you're right that I can't ask you to leave tonight. Not with Eli." Her posture loosened immediately. Her feet came down from the cushions and she sat up straighter. "Sofia, but we have to do this properly," I said, cutting her off before she could perform gratitude at me. "I have a rental property license attached to this unit for tax purposes. I can't have people living here off the books. If anything happens, a slip and fall, an insurance claim, anything, I'm exposed." She frowned slightly. "We're family. We're not going to sue you. It's not about trust. It's about the city's occupancy records." I said it the way I used to deliver project briefs at work. Confident, neutral, slightly technical, authoritative enough that she did not push back. "I just need you and Marcus to sign a temporary housing agreement. It protects both of us. You actually get more rights with a signed document than without one." That last part was the hook. I watched it land. Natalie was a woman who had spent 15 years believing she was one good break away from stability, and so anything that sounded like it was formalizing her position, securing her ground, was catnip. "What kind of agreement?" she asked. "Standard short-term occupancy." I drafted something. "It basically just says you're here in an official capacity while your housing situation resolves. There's a benefits section too. I can add you to my renter's umbrella policy while you're here, which means Eli's medical appointments in the building's urgent care clinic are covered under my plan." I watched her eyes change. "Medical coverage? While you're here?" "Yes. Full urgent care access. It expires when the agreement ends, obviously. But for the duration, you'd both be covered as dependents." Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, barefoot, with a burp cloth on his shoulder. He had heard the last part. He was listening now. Yeah, okay," Natalie said. She was trying to sound casual and failing. "Eli had been sick 3 times in the past 2 months. I knew this, because my mother told me everything." "Yeah, that makes sense. Show us." I sat at my kitchen island, the one that was still covered in their mess, and opened my laptop. I had already written the document at the copy center. I had printed 2 copies, but I made a show of typing for several minutes, scrolling through what I had drafted, nodding slightly, as if confirming everything was in order. I needed them to believe this was being assembled in real time, spontaneously, not that I had been building this trap for the last 40 minutes in a brightly lit print shop while a teenager behind the counter watched Netflix on his phone. I was not writing a lease. A lease would have been the worst thing I could give them. In this state, a lease creates a landlord-tenant relationship, which means formal eviction proceedings, which means 30 to 90 days minimum, and a judge who will prioritize the presence of a minor child every single time. I had researched this on my phone in the parking garage. What I was writing was a temporary accommodation agreement, structured as a personal services contract. Natalie would be designated as a household coordinator, responsible for maintaining the unit in my absence, coordinating cleaning schedules, accepting deliveries. In exchange, she and her family received temporary accommodation and supplemental insurance coverage through my personal umbrella policy. The key distinction: a tenant has possession rights. A personal services contractor has a revocable license to occupy. The moment the contract terminates, the license terminates with it. No eviction court. No 30-day notice. Just a termination letter and a trespass statute. I buried the lethal clauses where they always bury the lethal clauses, in the middle of the benefits section, written in the same neutral font as everything else. Section 6.2. Accommodation is provided solely as a condition of active service engagement. Section 8.4. Termination of service engagement results in immediate revocation of accommodation license, effective upon written notice. Section 10. 1. Occupants consent to electronic monitoring of common areas for asset and property protection purposes. Section 12.3. Occupants authorize background screening and public records review for insurance bonding compliance. That last one was important. I printed both copies on my wireless printer. Natalie watched the pages come out and reached for them before they had fully settled in the tray. "It's a lot of pages," she said, flipping through. "Standard boilerplate," I said. "The important parts are Section 3, where it outlines the insurance coverage, and Section 5, which is your move-in checklist. Everything else is just legal language the insurance company requires." Marcus leaned over her shoulder and read the way people read documents they have no intention of actually reading, eyes moving, not absorbing, looking for numbers and dates and their own names. He found the insurance section. His eyes slowed down. "This covers urgent care for Eli?" he asked. "For the duration of the agreement, yes. There's a summary of benefits on the last page." Natalie picked up the pen I had set on the counter. "Where do I sign?" "Bottom of page 4, and the last page. Marcus needs to sign the second copy." She did not read section 6.2. She did not read section 8.4. She did not read section 10. She flipped directly to page 4, wrote her name in the large, looping handwriting she had used since middle school, and then flipped to the last page and signed again. Marcus signed his copy in 2 places without looking up. I countersigned both copies, slid one across the island to Natalie, and folded the second into my bag. Okay, I said, standing. I'm going to give you the updated entry code. I'm reactivating my profile as the primary account holder. The old code you changed, I'm resetting that, just for building security compliance. Natalie shrugged. Sure. I pulled out my phone, opened the app, restored my profile, demoted Natalie to standard guest access, and created a new entry code. I wrote it on a sticky note and handed it to her. I have a morning call at 7, I said, so I'm going to get to sleep. Of course, Natalie said. She was already reaching for the remote again. Thank you, Sofia. I mean it. You're always the one who comes through. I walked to my bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. I did not feel triumphant. Not yet. I felt the particular exhaustion that comes from doing something that requires you to perform warmth while running calculations underneath it. I looked at the ceiling. I had spent 20 years being the one who came through, the responsible one, the one who saved, the one who did not ask for anything back, because asking felt like weakness, and because somewhere along the way, I had come to believe that being dependable was the same as being loved. I had been wrong about that for a long time. I opened my laptop on the nightstand and activated the security feed from the kitchen camera. I had installed the system 8 months ago, partly for insurance reasons and partly because I traveled for work and wanted to be able to check on the apartment remotely. Natalie had authorized it in section 10.1 approximately 40 minutes ago. On screen, she was back on my couch. Marcus was in my kitchen, opening my refrigerator. He took out a container of leftovers I had packed before the Chicago trip, smelled it, and put it in the microwave. My food, my microwave, his comfort. I set my phone to silent and tried to sleep. I did not sleep well, and in the morning I learned why. I was making coffee at 6:45 when I heard Natalie on the phone in the second bedroom. The door was open a crack. I was not trying to listen. I was standing 5 feet away in a small apartment, and she was not whispering. She has no idea, Natalie was saying, her voice carrying the low, amused register she used when she was talking to her friend Deb, the one who had been her co-conspirator in various schemes since high school. She thinks she's doing us a favor by making us sign some little paper. We're in a 2-bedroom with river views, Deb. For free. Marcus is already talking about enrolling Eli in the preschool 3 blocks over. I stood very still. Mom said as long as we don't make any noise, Sofia won't do anything. She never does anything. She just fumes. A pause. I know. But the thing is, she's always so responsible that she makes it easy. You don't have to trick responsible people. You just have to need something from them. I poured my coffee. I walked back to my bedroom. I sat down at my desk and opened the background check portal I had pulled up the night before, the one authorized under section 12.3. I had not run the check yet. I had wanted to wait until the signatures were dry. I ran it now. The report loaded in 4 minutes. I read it twice. Natalie had 2 evictions on record, both within the last 3 years. The most recent one was from 7 weeks ago, the one she had attributed to an illegal lockout by her landlord. The court records told a different story. She owed $11,000 in back rent and documented property damage. There was also a civil judgment filed against her from a collections firm, Hartley & Morse Associates, for $9,000 in unpaid credit balances, currently in active pursuit. And in the detailed address history section, something that made me set down my coffee cup, her previous address, listed as current in the collections database, was this apartment. My address. She had listed my home as her residence to at least 2 creditors without my knowledge or consent. People do not list someone else's address by accident. They do it when they need a place to receive mail that their own creditors cannot track. They do it when they are running from something. I checked the camera feed. Natalie was in the kitchen now, making eggs. She had pushed my coffee maker to the side to make room for her things. On the counter, stacked neatly next to the fruit bowl, was a pile of envelopes she had clearly pulled from my mailbox. 6 or 7 of them, bundled with a rubber band. She did not open them. She put them in the cabinet under the kitchen island, behind the pots and pans. The way you put something somewhere that is not a hiding place but is clearly a hiding place. I sat back in my chair. I understood now. She had not moved in because she was desperate. She had moved in because she was fleeing, and my apartment, my stable, responsible, purchased, with my own savings apartment, was the one address her collectors would not think to check. I was not her sister. I was her cover. I worked from home that day, which Natalie interpreted as permission to treat the apartment like a weekend. She and Marcus took Eli to the park around 10, and came back at noon with takeout they asked me to pay for, citing Venmo difficulties. I said sure and added it to a document I had already started labeling internally as the ledger. I was not going to need the ledger for anything. I just liked knowing the number. By afternoon, Marcus had connected his gaming console to my television. By evening, Natalie had reorganized my kitchen in a way she described as more functional. My good pans were in a different cabinet. My coffee maker had been moved to the floor of the pantry to make room for her air fryer. I said nothing. I documented everything. The contract I had written authorized monitoring of common areas for asset protection, and I was protecting my assets with quiet, comprehensive thoroughness. That night, after Eli was in bed and Marcus had fallen asleep in front of the television, Natalie came and sat next to me on the couch with a glass of my wine. She tucked her feet up, the way she had when we were kids, sharing the couch in our parents' house, and she said, "I really am grateful. You know, I don't always show it." I looked at her. She seemed to mean it. That was the thing about my sister that had always made this complicated. She was not purely calculating. She was someone who could genuinely mean something and also take advantage of you in the same breath, without ever registering the contradiction. "I know," I said. She leaned her head back. "Remember when Dad lost his job and Mom was working doubles? You used to wake up early and pack my lunch before school." "I remember. You've always been the one who holds things together." She said it warmly, like a compliment. And I understood something I had been slow to learn. She genuinely believed this was a system that worked. She needed things. I held things together. As far as she was concerned, this was a fair arrangement. We each contributed what we had. I turned off the television at 10 and went to bed. The next morning, I sent the termination notice. I had written it the night before, while Natalie was asleep. I sent it by email at 7:13 a.m. to both Natalie's and Marcus's email addresses, as required under Section 8.4. The subject line read, "Notice of Service Agreement, Termination and Accommodation License Revocation." The body was 7 sentences, professionally formatted, citing the specific section numbers. I gave them 48 hours. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter at 7:15. I watched from the hallway. She looked at it, frowned, sat up from the couch where she had apparently slept, picked up the phone, and read the email. There was a long pause. "What is this?" she said. It came out flat, the same way my voice had come out when I saw her standing in my doorway. Processing something too large to react to, I came into the kitchen. "It's the termination of the service agreement. You have 48 hours to vacate. You can't do this." She looked up from her phone. The warmth from the night before was completely gone. "We just got here. Eli is enrolled in a program down the street. He is not enrolled anywhere. You mentioned it as an intention. He has not started anywhere. Sofia, Natalie, I need you to read the document you signed, specifically Section 6.2 and Section 8.4. I didn't read all of that. I know you didn't. That's not my legal problem." Marcus appeared in the hallway. He had clearly read the email on his own phone because he was already holding it, already wearing the look of a man who was running numbers. "You can't just terminate a housing agreement with 48 hours notice. That's not legal. You need to give us 30 days minimum." "That would be true if you were tenants," I said. "You are not tenants. You are contractors with an accommodation license. Read Section 6.2. Your right to occupy this unit is a condition of service engagement, not an independent tenancy. The license is revocable." "We have a child," Natalie said. "I know. Which is why I gave you 48 hours instead of 24. I poured my coffee. "I also want to tell you something else." I set my mug down. "I ran the background check that you authorized in Section 12.3. I know about the eviction judgment from 7 weeks ago. I know about the Hartley and Morse collections case. And I know that you listed my address as your current residence with at least 2 creditors without telling me." The color in her face changed. "That mail you've been hiding under my kitchen island," I said quietly, "belongs to me by virtue of this address. And I've already been in contact with Hartley and Morse to correct the address record." She stared at me. Behind her, Marcus had gone very still. "I didn't want it to go this way," I said, and I meant it. "If you had called me, if you had asked, honestly, for help, I would have tried to help you. I have always tried to help you. But you came into my home and you changed my locks and you hid your legal problems in my kitchen cabinet and then you told your friend on the phone that you were counting on me not doing anything because I never do anything." I paused. "I do things, Natalie. I just prefer to do them carefully." She opened her mouth, closed it. 48 hours, I said. "I'll help you find temporary housing resources if you want them." She did not want them. She wanted to be angry, and she was. She and Marcus spent the better part of that morning alternating between arguing with me and arguing with each other in the second bedroom with the door closed. I worked at my kitchen island with my headphones in, and my documentation open in one tab, and my design project in another. I was not going to be moved by the argument. I had already decided. Around noon, Marcus knocked on my office door. I had taken the second bedroom back and set up my desk and told me, in a controlled and deliberate voice, that they were going to speak to a tenant's rights attorney. I told him that was completely within their rights, and that the agreement they had signed, including the date and both signatures, was documented in the property management system. He looked at me for a moment, reading my face. He did not say anything else. They left the next morning. Not at the 48-hour mark. Early. Natalie's friend came with an SUV, and they loaded their things while I was on a call. I watched on the security feed in the corner of my screen. Eli was eating crackers in the stroller. Natalie carried boxes without looking up at the camera. Marcus disconnected his gaming console and wrapped the cords with a neatness that seemed almost reflexive, automatic. At the door, Natalie stopped. She looked back at my apartment. The kitchen she had reorganized. The living room where she had slept under my weighted blanket, and I watched her face on the camera, looking for what was there. She was not crying. She did not look guilty exactly. She looked like someone who had been running a calculation that had come out wrong and was now recalibrating. She pulled the door closed behind her. I sat for a moment in the silence. Then I took off my headphones, stood up, and began putting my kitchen back together. I found the pile of envelopes she had hidden behind the pots and pans, and set them by the door to deal with separately. I moved the coffee maker back to its place on the counter. I put my good pans back in the cabinet on the left, where they had always been, where I had always known to find them. It took me about an hour to restore the apartment to itself. The handprint was still on the curtain, orange, small, low to the ground. I stood there with a damp cloth and worked at it carefully until it faded, and then I rinsed the cloth and draped it over the faucet and stood at the kitchen counter with my coffee, looking out at the river. I had loved my sister my entire life. I still loved her. That was the part that no one in my position ever said out loud, because it complicated the narrative. But it was true. I loved her, and I had set a legal trap for her, and both of those things existed at the same time without canceling each other out. What I understood now, what I had finally, at 32 years old, let myself understand was that love does not obligate you to be a resource. It does not mean that your stability is communal property, available to anyone who needs it more than you, as measured by whoever needs it loudest. My sister had always needed things loudly. I had always been quiet about what I needed. I had confused that imbalance for generosity on my part. It was not generosity. It was a boundary I had never drawn, and an invitation I had never rescinded, and a version of myself I had maintained because I did not know how to be the sister who said no without also feeling like the sister who did not love enough. I was learning. I blocked Natalie's number that afternoon. Not permanently, I told myself, though I was not sure that was true. I blocked my mother's number too, for the same reason. After she called twice in the morning, and left a voicemail that began with, "I just want to understand your side of it." I knew what that phrasing meant. It meant she had already heard Natalie's side. It meant her version of understanding my side was finding the way in which I had been unreasonable. I was not ready for that conversation yet. Maybe next week. Maybe next month. I would know when I was ready because I would be able to have it without needing her to validate what I had done. I was not there yet. What I was, that afternoon, was free. I made myself lunch. I sat at my kitchen island and ate it. I looked out at the river. The apartment was exactly how I had left it before Chicago, minus the curtain stain, which was already fading. Everything in its place. The quiet, exactly the kind of quiet I had saved 4 years to afford. My phone buzzed. Not a call, a notification from the building management app. My lock profile had been confirmed as sole primary user. I set the phone face down. I had spent a long time believing that the people who loved you were entitled to the things you had built, because building things was what you did, and needing things was what they did, and the arrangement made a kind of family sense. I had believed that saying no was the same as turning away. That protecting what was mine was a form of coldness. I was wrong about all of it. Protecting what is yours is not coldness. It is the most honest thing you can do. It is the refusal to let love become a mechanism for taking. It is the acknowledgement that you are a person, not a resource, and that the people who can only value you as a resource were never actually in relationship with you at all. I had not won anything. That was not the right word for it. I had just finally decided to stop losing.